Something shifted, and they felt it. You stopped. Stopped pursuing with the same intensity. Stopped tolerating their patterns with the same patience. Stopped hoping with the same desperation. Stopped organizing your emotional life around their availability or unavailability. Stopped making yourself smaller to accommodate their defended position. Stopped sacrificing your needs to maintain their comfort. You didn't announce the shift. Didn't declare that your love was ending or that you'd reached your limit. You just changed, became quieter, became less reactive to their withdrawal, became less devastated by their emotional unavailability, became less invested in whether they showed up or didn't show up. The pursuing stopped, the waiting stopped, the hoping stopped, and they noticed. Not consciously at first, not with full awareness that something fundamental had shifted, but their nervous system registered it, registered that you weren't leaning toward them the way you used to lean, weren't pursuing them the way you used to pursue, weren't emotionally organized around them the way you'd always been organized. Something changed in you, and the change created specific alarm in their defended system. Because throughout the relationship, your love, your pursuing, your patience, your hoping, your staying, despite their patterns, was the constant they took for granted, was the foundation they built their defended position on, was the guarantee that no matter how much they withdrew or pushed away or took you for granted, you'd still be there. You'd still love them. You'd still wait. But now the constant isn't constant anymore. The foundation feels unstable. The guarantee seems revoked. They're realizing, maybe not with full conscious awareness, but with definite nervous system recognition, that you don't love them the same way anymore. That something in you has fundamentally shifted. That the love they took for granted is either gone or going. And this realization doesn't create immediate transformation, doesn't produce instant recognition that they should have appreciated you while you were loving them, doesn't generate genuine change behavior based on understanding they're losing something valuable. Instead, the realization triggers testing. Systematic, predictable testing designed to determine, is the shift real or is it temporary? Have you actually stopped loving them? Or are you just strategically withdrawn, trying to make them chase you? Are you genuinely done? Or can they restore the old dynamic where you pursued and they controlled whether to respond? Understanding what tests they'll deploy when they realize you don't love them anymore helps you recognize the testing for what it is, attempt to restore control they're losing, and helps you maintain the boundary that your shift represents, rather than responding to tests in ways that teach them your boundary isn't real. The 3 realizations that trigger their testing. What changed that made them notice? The avoidant doesn't notice your shift immediately. Specific changes in your behavior create dawning recognition that something fundamental has changed in you. Realization 1. You stopped pursuing. Your absence of pursuit made them realize they'd been taking your chasing for granted as permanent feature of the dynamic. Throughout relationship, you pursued, reached out first, initiated contact, made plans, tried to close distance they created. Your pursuing was constant, was predictable, was guaranteed. They could withdraw knowing you'd pursue, could create distance knowing you'd bridge it, could be emotionally unavailable knowing you'd stay patient and available. Your pursuing allowed their patterns to be sustainable, allowed them to maintain defended position without losing the relationship. But then you stopped reaching out first, stopped initiating contact, stopped making plans, stopped trying to bridge their distance. The stopping created void where your pursuing used to be. And the void made them notice something. They'd been taking your pursuit for granted. had been assuming it would continue indefinitely regardless of their behavior, had built their comfortable position on foundation of your guaranteed pursuing. Now the pursuing is gone. The foundation feels unstable. The guarantee seems revoked. This recognition that you're not pursuing anymore, and you're not pursuing reveals how much they'd been counting on your pursuit, is first realization that triggers their testing. They need to know, is the stopped pursuing temporary or permanent? Are you just strategically withdrawn or genuinely done? Can they restore your pursuing, or is this shift real? Realization 2, you stopped reacting to their withdrawal. Your emotional neutrality about their patterns revealed how much your previous reactions were feeding their sense of significance. Previously, when they withdrew, you reacted, became anxious, became more pursuing, became visibly affected by their absence. Your reaction proved their significance, proved they mattered to you, proved their presence or absence had power to affect your emotional state. The reaction validated them, made them feel important, made them feel desired through your visible distress when they withdrew. But now you're not reacting. They withdraw and you're fine, neutral, not anxious, not pursuing harder, not visibly affected. Your neutrality is shocking to their system, makes them realize how much they'd been relying on your reaction to their withdrawal to prove their significance, how much their sense of mattering to you was built on your distress when they pulled away. Your neutrality suggests you're not distressed by their absence anymore. Their withdrawal doesn't affect you the way it used to affect you. They don't matter to you in the way they used to matter. This recognition that your reactions were proving their significance and your neutrality suggests their significance has diminished is second realization, triggering their testing. They need to know, do you actually not care anymore? Or are you hiding your caring? Is the neutrality real or strategic? Can they do something that will trigger the old reaction? Realization 3, you started building life without them. Your happiness and growth in their absence proved you don't need them the way they needed to believe you needed them. The most disturbing realization, you're thriving without them. They withdrew, expecting you to struggle in their absence, expected you to be diminished, lonely, waiting desperately for their return. But you're not struggling, you're building life, building yourself, building happiness that doesn't depend on them or their presence. You're lighter, more yourself, visibly better off in their absence than you were in their presence. This thriving destroys their belief that you need them, destroys their assumption that their presence is essential to your well-being, destroys their sense that you couldn't function without them. Your thriving proves you not only can survive without them, you can thrive without them. You're better without them than you were with them. This proof is devastating to their ego, is evidence that they weren't as essential as they needed to believe, that you don't need them, that you're actually better off having moved away from their patterns. This recognition that you're building and thriving and better off without them is third realization triggering their testing. They need to know, is the thriving real or performance? Are you genuinely building without them or trying to make them jealous? Have you actually moved on, or can they pull you back? The 4 tests they'll deploy to determine if your love is actually gone. The avoidance testing follows predictable pattern. Understanding the tests helps you recognize them and maintain your boundary rather than responding in ways that teach them your shift isn't real. Test 1, breadcrumbing, sending minimal contact to see if you'll respond with the warmth and engagement that would prove you still care. After period of you're not pursuing, they reach out. Casual message. How are you? Thinking about you. Saw this and thought of you. The message is carefully calibrated. Minimal investment from them, designed to appear casual and friendly. The breadcrumb is testing if you'll respond. Testing if you'll respond with warmth. Testing if minimal effort from them can generate significant engagement from you. If you respond warmly, if you answer enthusiastically, ask questions, try to continue conversation, you've failed the test from your boundaries perspective. You've shown them your shift wasn't real, that you still care. That minimal effort still produces your engagement, that they can restore the old dynamic where you do all the emotional work. But if you don't respond, or respond minimally, without warmth or invitation to continue, you've passed. You've demonstrated the shift is real, that breadcrumbs don't work anymore, that minimal effort doesn't produce your engagement, that you're actually not available for the dynamic where you give much more than they give. The breadcrumbing is their first, least vulnerable test, requires minimal investment from them while gathering maximum information about whether you still care. Don't respond to breadcrumbs. Maintain your boundary by showing them minimal effort doesn't reach you anymore. Test 2. Creating crisis, manufacturing situation that historically would have triggered your caretaking response to see if you'll come running to help them. They create or exaggerate crisis. Something difficult is happening, something they need support with, something that would have historically triggered your empathic response. You're caring, you're showing up to help. The crisis is shared with you, not always directly, sometimes through mutual friend or through social media, in a way that's designed to reach you and trigger your response. The crisis is testing if your caring is still accessible, testing if difficulty in their life will make you reach out, testing if you'll come running to help the way you used to come running. If you respond with care, if you reach out offering support, asking if they're okay, trying to help, you've failed the test from your boundaries perspective. You've shown them you still care enough to respond to their struggles, that the door is still cracked, that they can access you through showing vulnerability or need. But if you don't respond, or respond with minimal acknowledgement but no caretaking, you've passed. You've shown that their struggles don't trigger your automatic caregiving anymore, that you're not available to rescue them, that you've actually stopped organizing around their needs. The crisis test is more vulnerable than breadcrumbing because it requires them to show need or difficulty. But it's also more likely to trigger your response if you still care. Resist the crisis. Maintain your boundary by recognizing manufactured difficulty is attempt to pull you back into dynamic where you care for them while they remain defended. Test 3. Intensity, followed by withdrawal. Brief period of giving you exactly what you've wanted to see if you'll soften. Then withdrawing to see if the softening made you vulnerable again. They escalate, suddenly become available in ways they weren't available before. Give you attention, give you emotional presence, give you what you've been wanting throughout relationship. The giving is intense, but brief. Lasts days or maybe weeks, creates hope, creates sense they've finally changed, creates softening in you because you're finally getting what you've needed. Then, abruptly, they withdraw again. The giving stops. The availability disappears. The emotional presence vanishes. They're back to old patterns of distance and unavailability. The intensity followed by withdrawal is test. The intensity was testing if you'll soften when they give you what you want. The withdrawal is testing if the softening made you vulnerable again. If the cycle restored the old dynamic where they control your emotional state through their availability or unavailability. If you softened during the intensity and then pursued when they withdrew, devastated by the withdrawal, trying to restore the intensity, you've failed the test. You've shown them the old dynamic is still accessible, that giving you what you want makes you vulnerable, that they can hook you through intensity, then control you through withdrawal. But if you didn't soften during intensity, or softened but didn't pursue when they withdrew, you've passed. You've shown that temporary giving doesn't restore your hope, that you see the pattern, that withdrawal after intensity doesn't devastate you anymore because you expect it. The intensity withdrawal test is most sophisticated, requires them to be vulnerable during intensity phase, but it's also designed to restore the cycle that kept you hooked. Hope through intensity, devastation through withdrawal, pursuing to restore intensity. Don't let the cycle hook you again. Maintain your boundary by recognizing temporary intensity is test, not change. Test 4. Competing with your new life, attempting to prove they're more exciting, more important, more worthy of your time than whatever you're building without them. They notice you're building life, building yourself, building happiness that doesn't include them, and they attempt to compete. Attempt to prove they're more exciting than whatever you're building, more important than the life you're creating, more worthy of your attention than your own growth. The competing might be direct, inviting you to do exciting things, offering experiences you've wanted, presenting themselves as better option than the building you're doing, or indirect, creating circumstances where their life looks more exciting than yours, where choosing them would mean choosing adventure over the boring building work you're doing. The competition is testing if they can pull you away from your building, testing if exciting experiences with them are more appealing than steady growth without them, testing if you'll choose the intensity they offer over the peace you're building. If you abandon your building to choose their excitement, if you're pulled back by the competition, if you decide their intensity is more valuable than your peace, you've failed the test. You've shown that your building wasn't real priority, that they can still pull you away from yourself. That intensity they offer is more compelling than stability you're creating. But if you maintain your building despite their competition, if you choose your peace over their intensity, your growth over their excitement, your life over their drama, you've passed. You've shown that what you're building is more valuable than what they're offering, that your priorities have genuinely shifted, that you're choosing yourself over choosing them. The competition test reveals whether your building is genuine or was just waiting for them to offer something compelling enough to pull you back. Maintain your building. Choose your peace. Show them through your choices that what you're creating without them is more valuable than anything they're offering. The uncomfortable mirror. Turn. Why you knowing about the tests means you're still oriented toward them. But examine honestly, why are you reading about what tests they'll deploy? Why do you need to know what they'll do when they realize you don't love them anymore? Why does their testing matter to you if you've genuinely stopped loving them? Because if you've actually stopped loving them, if you've genuinely moved on, if you're truly building life without them, their tests should be irrelevant to you. You shouldn't care what they do to test if your love is gone. Shouldn't need to prepare for their breadcrumbs, or their crises, or their intensity withdrawal cycles. Shouldn't be tracking their behavior at all because you're too busy building to notice whether they're testing you or not. The fact that you want to know about the test reveals you're not as done as you think you are. You're still oriented toward them, still tracking their behavior, still preparing for their moves, still organizing some part of your mental and emotional energy around their response to your shift. This orientation means the shift isn't complete, isn't fully about you choosing yourself, is partially about you creating condition where they'll pursue you or partially about you needing validation that they noticed your shift, or partially about you hoping your shift will trigger their transformation. Real shift, real stopping loving them, means you don't care about the tests. Don't prepare for them. Don't track whether they're deploying them. Don't organize energy around their response to your change. You changed for yourself, for your healing, for your freedom. Not to trigger their testing or their recognition or their pursuit. If you're tracking the tests, you're not fully free. You're still entangled, still hoping, still oriented toward them rather than toward your own building. Stop tracking the tests. Stop preparing for their response. Stop organizing around whether they notice your shift. Build so completely in your own life that their testing becomes background noise you don't even register. That's when the shift is real. That's when you've actually stopped loving them. Not when you can identify and resist their tests. When you're too busy building to notice the tests are happening. Why the tests won't restore. What they're testing for? The paradox. They can't understand. The avoidance testing reveals fundamental misunderstanding about what they're testing, and why the testing itself proves they're not capable of what would restore your love. The tests are built on control, attempting to manipulate your response rather than earning your love through changed behavior. Every test is control attempt. Breadcrumb attempts to control whether you respond. Crisis attempts to control whether you care. Intensity, withdrawal, attempts to control your emotional state. Competition attempts to control your priorities. All of it is manipulation designed to restore their control over dynamic they're losing control of. But here's the paradox. The testing itself proves they're not capable of what would actually restore your love. What would restore your love, if restoration were possible, isn't passing their tests or failing their tests. Is them doing genuine, sustained transformation work. Is them addressing their attachment wounds through therapy. Is them developing capacity for sustained emotional availability. Is them becoming capable of reciprocal partnership. Is them showing through consistent change behavior over extended time that they've become a different person who can meet your needs. The testing is opposite of this. Is them attempting to manipulate you back into old dynamic rather than doing work that would create new dynamic. The more they test, the more they prove they're not doing the work. The more they attempt to control your response, the more they reveal they're still in defended position that made relationship unsustainable. You stopping loving them should trigger self-examination and therapeutic work. Instead, it's triggering testing and manipulation. This difference between what would create real possibility and what they're actually doing proves they're not capable of the transformation that would make relationship viable. Testing proves they still need your love for validation, but need for validation is what prevents them from being capable of reciprocal love. Why are they testing? Why do they need to know if you still love them? Because they need your love for validation. Need it to prove their worth. Need it to feel secure. Need it for their ego. The need reveals something. They still want your love for what it provides them, not because they love you. They want your validation, your pursuit, your emotional investment. Want these things because these things make them feel important, desirable, significant. But wanting your love for validation purposes is exactly what prevented them from reciprocating your love during relationship. Love that's about validation seeking is self-focused love, is taking rather than giving, is needing what you provide rather than valuing who you are. The testing reveals they still relate to your love as source of validation rather than as gift from person they value. And this reveals they're still not capable of reciprocal love, still not capable of loving you for who you are rather than for what you provide. Still not capable of the partnership that would require them to give as much as they take. The testing that's meant to determine if your love is gone actually proves why your love going was necessary, because they relate to your love as validation source, not as relationship with whole person they value enough to reciprocate. If tests worked, if they successfully restored your love through manipulation, they'd have proven you were right to stop loving them. Think about what successful tests would prove. Let's say breadcrumb worked. You responded warmly. They successfully pulled you back into pursuing. What would this success prove? Would prove you're still vulnerable to manipulation, still available to be controlled through minimal effort, still willing to accept crumbs. Would prove your boundary wasn't real, your shift wasn't genuine, your stopping loving them was temporary strategy they could override through testing. This success would prove you weren't serious about your needs, you're still controllable, you're still accepting insufficient relationship, which would prove they were right not to take your needs seriously during relationship, right to take you for granted, right that patterns don't have real consequences because you'll stay regardless. Successful test would validate every poor treatment they gave you during relationship by proving you still accept it. Would prove your stopping loving them was justified because you're still person who accepts being manipulated and controlled, rather than person who enforces boundaries, requiring genuine change. The paradox is complete. If their tests worked, they'd prove you were right to stop loving them. If tests don't work, if you maintain your boundary, they lose what they're testing for, but you prove you've actually become person who won't accept insufficient treatment. Either outcome, the testing proves the relationship as it was can't be restored. They're attempting to restore it through manipulation rather than through transformation, is why it shouldn't be restored. What passing the tests actually accomplishes, the outcome that serves you versus the outcome that serves them. Understanding what happens when you pass versus fail. Each test helps you see why maintaining your boundary through all tests is essential for your freedom. Passing the test proves to you that your shift is real. Each test you don't respond to confirms you're choosing yourself over being controlled by them. Every test you pass is evidence to yourself that the shift is real, that you're actually not loving them the way you used to love them, that you're actually choosing yourself over being pulled back into their orbit. Breadcrumb comes and you don't respond. Proof you're not still hoping for their contact. Crisis happens and you don't rescue. Proof you're not still organizing around their needs. Intensity appears and you don't soften. Proof you're not still hoping they'll change. Competition emerges and you choose your building. Proof your priorities have genuinely shifted. Each past test is confirmation. Confirmation that the internal shift has external manifestation, that you're not just thinking about choosing yourself, but actually choosing yourself when choice is required. The passing creates confidence, creates evidence you can point to when you doubt yourself, creates proof that you're capable of maintaining boundary, even when maintaining it is uncomfortable or when they're deploying strategies that would have worked before. The tests, paradoxically, serve you when you pass them. Each test passed is opportunity to prove to yourself you've changed, that the shift is real, that you're not the person who accepted insufficient treatment anymore. You're a person who maintains boundaries, regardless of what they do, to test those boundaries. Failing the test teaches them your boundaries aren't real. Every response to their testing confirms they can restore the old dynamic through sufficient manipulation. But if you fail the tests, if you respond to breadcrumbs, rescue during crisis, soften during intensity, abandon building for their competition, you teach them crucial lesson. Your boundaries aren't real. Your shift was temporary. You're stopping loving them with strategy, not genuine change. The teaching is what makes failing so costly. Because once they learn your boundaries are negotiable, they learn they don't have to change. Learn they can restore old dynamic through testing. Learn that manipulation works better than transformation. Learn that if they just deploy right test at right time, you'll come back without requiring them to do the work. This teaching means future will repeat past. They'll continue patterns that don't serve you. You'll continue accepting those patterns while claiming you won't. The cycle continues because failing the tests taught them the cycle is sustainable. Taught them you say you need change, but you don't enforce consequences when change doesn't occur. Taught them your words about your needs aren't backed by actions. Every failed test makes future relationship less viable because every failed test teaches them they don't have to become capable of meeting your needs. They just have to manipulate skillfully enough to keep you despite not meeting your needs. Maintaining boundaries through all tests creates clean outcome. Either they do genuine work when manipulation fails, or you're free to build without them attempting to pull you back. If you pass all tests, if you maintain boundary through breadcrumbs and crises and intensity and competition, you create clean outcome. One of two things happens. Either they recognize manipulation doesn't work and they start doing genuine work, sustained therapy, actual behavior change, demonstrated transformation over extended period. This outcome is rare but possible, is the only way relationship could become viable. Or they recognize manipulation doesn't work and they give up, stop testing, accept you're gone, move on to finding someone else whose boundaries are weaker and who will accept the patterns you won't accept anymore. This outcome is more common, and this outcome serves you by freeing you completely, frees you from their attempts to pull you back, frees you from ongoing testing, frees you to build without someone attempting to compete with your building or manipulate you away from it. Either outcome, genuine work or giving up, serves you better than outcome where you fail tests and teach them manipulation works. Genuine work creates possibility for viable relationship. Giving up creates freedom to build without interference. Both are better than teaching them through failed tests that boundaries are negotiable, and manipulation is effective strategy for keeping you without requiring them to change. The specific moments. When they'll intensify testing, when your boundary holding creates their crisis. Understanding when tests will intensify helps you prepare for the moments when maintaining boundary will be most difficult and most important. When you start visibly thriving, your happiness without them triggers their desperate need to prove they're still significant to you. The testing intensifies when you're visibly thriving, when they see through social media or mutual friends or chance encounter that you're genuinely happy, genuinely building, genuinely better without them. Your thriving creates crisis for them, creates evidence they weren't as essential as they needed to believe, creates proof you don't need them. Your thriving makes them desperate to prove they still matter, still have significance in your life, still have power to affect you. The desperation increases testing intensity, more frequent breadcrumbs, more dramatic crises, more intense giving followed by withdrawal, more aggressive competition with your building, all of it designed to restore their significance through getting you to respond. Your thriving threatens their ego, threatens their sense of being important to you. The testing is an attempt to restore importance through manipulation when they're too defended to restore it through genuine connection. Expect testing to intensify exactly when you're doing well, when you're happiest, when you're most visibly thriving. This is when they need most desperately to prove you still care. Recognize the intensification as evidence your thriving is working. is creating the life without them that makes their significance in your life diminish. Don't let intensified testing pull you away from thriving that's triggering the testing. When you show interest in someone new, potential replacement triggers, territorial response, even though they never claimed you when they had you. Similarly, testing intensifies if you show interest in someone new. If they learn through any means that you're dating or interested in someone, suddenly, the avoidant who couldn't commit becomes territorial. The person who wouldn't claim you when they had you doesn't want anyone else to have you. The territorial response isn't about love, is about ego, is about not wanting to be replaced, is about wanting you to remain available as backup option, even though they're not choosing you as primary option. The potential replacement triggers intensified testing, more intense pursuit, more vulnerability than you've seen before, more promises about changing, all designed to interfere with new connection, designed to make you doubt the new person, designed to pull you back through making you believe they finally want what they wouldn't give you during relationship. Recognize this pattern. Recognize that territorial response isn't genuine commitment, is ego protection, is attempt to prevent replacement while still not offering actual relationship. The timing, pursuit when you're with someone else, withdrawal when that someone else disappears, proves the pursuit is about competition and control, not about genuine desire for relationship with you. Don't let territorial testing pull you away from someone new who might actually be capable of meeting needs the avoidant never met. When you enforce consequence for their testing, refusing to respond to manipulation creates panic that drives more desperate testing before they give up. Finally, testing intensifies when you're successfully maintaining boundary, when you're passing the tests, when you're not responding to breadcrumbs, not rescuing during crisis, not softening during intensity, not abandoning building for competition. Your successful boundary maintenance creates panic, creates recognition that manipulation isn't working, creates fear they're actually losing you permanently. The panic produces escalation. More desperate testing, more extreme attempts, more vulnerable offerings, more dramatic gestures. The escalation is last-ditch attempt, is them deploying everything they have to break your boundary before accepting boundary is real. This is hardest moment, the moment when their testing is most intense and your resolve is most tested, the moment when they're giving you what you've wanted, vulnerability, pursuit, promises, and you have to recognize it's crisis-driven, not capacity-driven. The moment when maintaining boundary feels cruelest because they're visibly suffering. But this moment is crucial. This is moment that determines outcome. If you hold boundary through most desperate testing, they either accept your boundary is real and stop testing, or they recognize manipulation has completely failed and they move on. Either outcome serves you. If you break during desperate testing, you teach them that sufficient desperation breaks your boundary, which means future testing will always escalate to desperation, because desperation is what works. Hold the boundary through desperate testing. That's when boundary is most important. When holding, it is hardest, and when holding it determines whether you're free or whether you've taught them. Desperation is the key that unlocks your boundary. The final truth about what happens when the avoidant realizes you don't love them anymore. They realize you don't love them anymore. The pursuing stopped. The reactions stopped. The organizing around them stopped. You're building life without them and thriving in their absence. This realization triggered testing. Breadcrumbs to see if you'll respond. Crises to see if you'll rescue. Intensity to see if you'll soften. Competition to see if you'll abandon your building. All designed to determine if your shift is real or if they can restore old dynamic through manipulation. Your response to the testing determines everything, determines whether you're free or whether you've taught them manipulation works, determines whether they give up or whether they learn to escalate, determines whether you prove to yourself the shift is real or whether you discover it was temporary. Pass the tests, all of them. Don't respond to breadcrumbs. Don't rescue during crisis. Don't soften during intensity. Don't abandon building for competition. Every test passed is proof to yourself you've changed. Every test passed is evidence boundary is real. Every test passed moves you closer to freedom. Either freedom of them giving up when manipulation fails, or freedom of them doing genuine work when they recognize manipulation won't restore what they lost. Either outcome serves you better than failing tests, and teaching them your boundaries are negotiable. They realize you don't love them anymore, and they're testing to see if the realization is accurate. Prove through your boundary maintenance that the realization is accurate. Prove you've stopped loving them by not being pulled back by any test they deploy. Prove your shift is real by maintaining it through breadcrumbs and crises and intensity and competition. Prove you're choosing yourself by continuing to choose yourself regardless of what they do to test, if you'll choose them instead. That's the answer to their testing. That's the response that serves you. That's what passing the tests accomplishes. Not making them love you or making them change, but proving to yourself you've actually stopped loving them in ways that allow you to be manipulated back into loving someone who couldn't reciprocate. They're testing, you're building. Both are happening. Only one determines your future. Choose building. Choose yourself. Choose maintaining every boundary regardless of every test. That's freedom. That's the life their realization created opportunity for. That's what happens when you actually stop loving someone. You stop being controlled by their testing of whether you still love them because you're too busy building life they're not part of to notice the tests or care about the results. Live that. Build that. Be so far into your own building that their testing is distant noise that doesn't reach you. That's when you've actually stopped loving them. Not when you can identify and resist their tests, when you're too busy living to notice their testing at all.